BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all of your sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing, and we're into the NBA and NHL playoffs, and BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting while the games are being played. With the largest selection of odds on everything from Major League Baseball, NBA, NHL, and UFC fighting, BetOnline remains the best online source for all of your sports wagering information. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all of the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. BetOnline, the game starts here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bleav in Bengals podcast. Yours truly, Solomon Wilcots, and our Cincinnati Bengals insider, Charlie Goldsmith. Charlie, how you doing today, my friend?
Doing good. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Look, we've got a lot to talk about here. I want to get started by just kind of talking about what we see and how we feel now that the NFL schedule has come out. Cincinnati Bengals, had 6 primetime games during the 2024 season. Right now, they're listed for 4 primetime games. To me, Lamar Chase and Joe Burrow are must-see TV. Are you okay with the 4 primetime games? And they could be flexed in for even more.
Yeah, I see 4 primetime games, or just 4 primetime games, is a bit of a win for the Bengals. There are a lot of ways this schedule could have been much more difficult for them. Christmas games, international games, all the bells and whistles and hoops that NFL teams have to jump through these days. The Bengals will also probably end up in more true primetime slots. When you look at the era of flexing that we're in right now, I bet they end up getting an extra Sunday night game or two, but that's much easier than trying to go across the Atlantic Ocean. So the Bengals avoided some potential challenges that the schedule can create, and it plays out pretty well for them.
Yeah, look, I believe Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase are must-see TV. And that's why I'm surprised that they're not featured this year in an international game, going across the pond, playing potentially in Germany or in London. I could see the league wanting to showcase the Bengals. Given what they have on offense, they would be a perfect representative, right, of NFL football played abroad.
And they will be, and they'll definitely get that opportunity. And we're now into the very nitpick weeds of, well, how do future stadium plans and future home schedules for 2027 impact what you're doing in 2025? But even though it wasn't reflected in the schedule, the Bengals are still viewed as a prime draw. And again, I bet in December they get a couple of these games flexed because that is the type of team they're viewed as.
Well, I'm looking at the Cincinnati Bengals schedule. They're going to start their first 4 games. They've got the Cleveland Browns on the road. They got Jacksonville. Then you got Minnesota on the road, and the Denver Broncos. So at home against Cleveland and Jacksonville, and then on the road at Minnesota and Denver. If you go look at the last 3 seasons, Cincinnati Bengals have gotten off to the slow start that we've become accustomed to seeing. They're 4-8 through the first 4 games over the last 3 seasons. So why has this been a problem, and how can they improve upon it?
It's the narrative. It's the narrative that they're admitting to, that they're addressing. It's also a narrative that I disagree with. You're going to see the Bengals play more in the preseason, and that's fine. That'll probably help in some ways for the start of the season. But the guys who have played poorly for them in week 1 in particular are guys who wouldn't have been playing in the preseason anyway, or wouldn't have been getting much training camp time anyway. Guys like Joe Burrow, who's being managed coming back from a wrist injury in 24, a calf injury in 23, an appendectomy in 22. He wasn't even in a position where he could have played a lot of preseason games or a lot of preseason snaps. Last year it would have been Ja'Marr Chase was holding in. He wasn't going to make himself available for the preseason. So all of these guys who would be playing more, who you would need to come off to a faster start, it's more the stuff you deal with in the summer impacts how you start, as opposed to, in my opinion, what you do in the preseason.
I would totally agree with you. By the way, I just want to make sure I'm clear. Cincinnati Bengals start the season on the road at the Cleveland Browns, then home for Jacksonville, and then on the road the next 2 weeks against a good Minnesota Vikings team and a really good Denver Broncos team that has a defense that led the league in sacks. So 3 of their first 4 games on the road, 2 of them on the road against playoff teams. That's going to be a slippery slope. Now, they're going to have to manage this offseason, as you said, to make sure they get off to that fast start. What do you think they'll do? What do you think they can do?
Well, first of all, they're going to have to tackle better. And that goes into how they make those kind of preparations and installations and how they teach. Yeah. There can't be the same sort of mental errors that we saw in the first couple weeks of last season. It's a unit that Al Golden was brought in to fix, to make it smoother, cleaner, and easier to operate. Now, you mentioned the difficulty of the schedule, specifically when you get past the first 2 weeks. But still, Browns, Jaguars, Vikings, Broncos. While the Vikings and Broncos are good, the Vikings will have a first-year starter at quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. Yep. The Broncos, I don't quite trust their offense yet. So it's not a great collection of offenses they'll be facing. Will help a defense in transition hit the ground running.
But certainly those Minnesota Vikings teams, Denver Broncos, they have really great defensive units. And obviously the Cleveland Browns, any defense with Myles Garrett on it, you have to be mindful that he can wreck shop. There's no doubt about it. I want to talk about Cincinnati Bengals, Baltimore Ravens rivalry. They're going to play in the evening night game on Thanksgiving Day. But go back to the 2 games last year, Charlie. Do you know that they combined for a total of 148 points scored in their 2 games? And in both of those games, both teams scored over 30 points in both of the games when they played one another last year. This is turning into a potential shootout on Thanksgiving night between Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, the Lamar Jackson effect has even had a big impact in how the Bengals have built this defense and what they've prioritized on defense, prioritizing things like speed at linebacker from a Demetrius Knight or a Barrett Carter, prioritizing speed at defensive end, a guy like Myles Murphy, who was a big part of it as well. For guys on the edge who can set the edge and try to keep Lamar contained as they establish that rush plan. So the Bengals, as they get younger and as they try to refresh this defense, have offenses like that in mind. Will it be good enough? That'll be the story of the season. But the Bengals have been planning for these matchups in this rivalry with the Ravens.
Despite the high scoring volume in the 2 games allowed by the Bengals defense against Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, who's going to be coming back. He signed a contract extension with the Baltimore Ravens. I always thought Lou Anarumo did a really good job against Lamar Jackson, simply because they knew how to control him and keep him in the pocket. While he's gotten better as a passer, he didn't always really break out in the run game like what he did with other teams. How might Al Golden borrow from some of those Lou Anarumo defenses to continue their success, at least at containing Lamar, while at the same time now having to deal with the headache that is Derrick Henry?
The Henry effect was something the Bengals never did have an answer for last season. When they've been at their best against Lamar specifically, it's been a very aggressive blitzing style and the way they disguise looks at the line of scrimmage as well. Now, will it be as much of a disguising defense as they try to simplify things under Al Golden? That's one of the questions that we'll need to figure out during training camp. Can they disguise like Lou Anarumo did, coverage-wise, to try to throw Lamar off, to try to make him make a mistake? Because if that doesn't happen, Lamar is going to beat you. So I'm very interested to see if they take that aggressive approach or if they use their speed they have on the back end and try to be more conservative and don't just get beat deep. There'll be a lot at play there as the Bengals try to find some answer that they really haven't had for Lamar in a couple seasons.
Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow combined for 17 touchdown passes in their 2 games against one another last year. You think the schedule makers were looking at some of this production and these 2 quarterbacks and what potentially could be a shootout on Thanksgiving night?
I would assume when they sat down and ranked the games that these networks wanted the most, Bengals Ravens was very, very high on these draft boards that they have. And I mean, that's a prime time slot, Thanksgiving night. That is one of the ones that show that they want all eyes on this game.
Joe Burrow, 9 touchdown passes in his 2 games against the Ravens last year. Lamar Jackson had 8 touchdown passes, 4 in each game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Of course, the Ravens would end up winning those 2 games. So to say that the Cincinnati Bengals owe the Baltimore Ravens would be an understatement. Look, the Bengals finished hot during the 2024 season, winning each of their last 5 games. As you take a look at the schedule, how do you see those final 5 games sort of lending itself to maybe the Bengals going on a run? Whenever Joe Burrow is the starter for the full season for the Bengals, he tends to go on these kind of runs where he wins consecutive games in a row over a nice little stretch.
The key stretch of the season is Ravens, Bills, Ravens, and that's weeks 13, 14, and 15.
That's right.
Then they close it out with Dolphins, Cardinals, Browns. Why I want to focus on that first chunk of games is, here's what a Bengals player told me last season. He said, we need a game where everyone gets a game ball. And if you know Zach Taylor, you know that's what he does. It's like what they call a program win. It's a stake your flag down moment. We're here. We can beat anybody, anywhere. That type of moment that gives you a true momentum and confidence that rolls on to the rest of the season. And with all due respect, you're not going to be able to get that against the Dolphins, the Cardinals, or the Browns. But if you can win one, or if you can win 2 of those games against the Ravens, Bills, and Ravens, you are now you're making the playoffs if you win 2 of those games. And then you're entering the playoffs with the true, not just confidence, the truth that you can beat anyone in this field. So winning those games will go a long way, even into the postseason.
I talked to Joe Burrow about it, about that 5-game kind of run that they went on to close out the season. And I said, where did it all crystallize? When did it all come together? He pointed to the first of those 5 straight wins as that game in Dallas. It was like the bounce of the ball. Remember on the special teams play, and Cincinnati Bengals recover it. And right then and there, Joe come running back on the field. He wasted no time. He said, I got the ball to Jamar Chase, and the rest was history. They went on to win 5 straight games. But it was in that moment, I think that was in a Monday night game. They were on the road. They were playing the Dallas Cowboys. They needed that win, and somehow were able to scratch it out. Again, got the bounce of the ball. That's what allowed them to find their footing. The defense played better in the final month of the season, and they were able to win 5 in a row. How about that? Your thoughts on it?
The offense was humming, was firing. They had that the second half of last season was all about the explosion of Chase Brown and them recognizing that he might be a top 15, top 10 running back in this league right now. It was having a fully crystallized vision of how they wanted to use Mike Gesicki. The defense also played better. I don't know that the defense did answer any questions, though, during the last 5 games of this season, because the quarterbacks they were facing were Will Levis and Cooper Rush started that game for the Cowboys. Dorian Thompson-Robinson for the Browns. Bo Nix played poorly. The Bengals defense still has a lot to show, but there is so much proof of concept there that this is a unit that gets better as the season goes on.
That Dallas game was also a game that I thought DJ Turner was starting to play very well. And then he gets hurt. And there were some other games down the stretch where things started to turn, but we did see some players beginning to play well. Speaking of players, since now that the draft is over, we've already seen free agency. I know there were some guys that you wanted to talk about that were added in the free agent process and really just trying to define their roles. I want to start with a guy that we bring back, and I don't know that enough has been talked about, Samaje Perine coming back to the Cincinnati Bengals. When you saw him coming back to the Cincinnati Bengals, Charlie, what bells went off for you? What did that mean to you?
Well, the biggest thing that stood out originally was Samaje Perine was the guy who caught the pass that basically clinched the AFC title game for the Kansas City Chiefs. So if there's any questions about if he still has it, he still has it. He just made one of the biggest plays of the season for Kansas City. There is a comfort and a peace of mind on third downs, the experience and the physicality and the hands that Samaje brings to the table. A couple weeks ago, just kind of for fun, I was going through some 2022 Bengals tape. Samaje was good, looking like a real starting back. Now, maybe he's dropped off a nick. The Broncos didn't play him a ton. The Chiefs didn't play him a ton. But there's still a lot of quality and a lot of peace of mind that he gives the Bengals.
You know where your floor is with him. And let me tell you right now, his floor is pretty high. He is a really good, sound, fundamental ball player who does everything well. He can run it. He's a great in pass protection when it comes to protecting the quarterback, Joe Burrow. And then when it's a guy who's got to catch the ball coming out of the backfield, he's always been phenomenal. You just get the sense there's a high level of trust with Zach Taylor as it pertains to Samaje P. Ryan. Talk to me about offensive guard Patrick Lucas, who comes over in free agency. How does he fit in the mix?
The Bengals feel like they identified something here. It's too much of an exaggeration to call him a diamond in the rough, but because he's not going to be a standout offensive guard, but he can certainly elevate what they've had. He, a lot of high level experience blocking for Aaron Rodgers, some real versatility, kind of a tough, sturdy anchor guy who grinds his way to not allowing many sacks or many pressures. He fits in that room as a veteran, kind of a guy who, again, knows what he's doing. Next to, they see that in Ted Karras. They see that in Orlando Brown. They didn't have a lot of money to spend at the guard position, so they knew they'd have to get creative. Patrick has spent a lot of his career at center, but they feel like there are a lot of transferable qualities that can make him at least a fine guy who, in the Bengals' eyes, this will be the last conversation we have about him because he'll be fine, and they'll just kind of keep going with the season.
Yeah, he's a guy that's played in a lot of big games, a lot of big moments, protecting, as you said, Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love with the Green Bay Packers. Speaking of which, defensive tackle TJ Slaton comes over in free agency. We really did need to pencil in a player here. We don't need you to be spectacular. Just be steady. Just be consistent. If we can find just another interior defensive lineman who is steady, that would go a long way. What do you see with TJ Slaton?
The most under-discussed Bengal, because he was the big guy that they added. He's making way more than any of these other guys we're discussing. When they recognized the resources they had available for them to use and what they wanted to add, they staked their flag as you need a nose tackle. And I like McKinley Jackson especially, and Chris Jenkins can be a starter in this league as well. But neither of those guys have shown the ability to really take on double teams and to hold the point of attack when offensive lines kind of throw their weight at them with multiple bodies to try to open up some different rushing attacks. And that was the reason why the Bengals kept facing 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1. Their whole plan is, well, if it's 3rd and 4, this defense will be in a much more manageable spot. And Slaton, again, is them saying it's all about run defense. Even as much as the pass defense struggled this year, they really prioritized stopping the run.
Really missed DJ Reader in more ways than one, didn't they?
They missed him just as much off the field as they missed him on the field.
That's right.
And he was a heck of a player and a heck of a leader.
Heck of a leader in the locker room, and huge void, you might say, that still waiting for someone to step in and fill that void, particularly as a leader in the locker room. Oren Burks is an interesting player for me because I watched him last year at the Philadelphia Eagles. Was not a full-time starter, sort of a swing guy at the linebacker position. When Nakobe Dean went down, he stepped into the starting lineup. And that defense in Philadelphia under Vic Fangio didn't miss a beat, where he started in the postseason, including the Super Bowl, and helped bring home a title. So that was no small thing. He just wasn't a guy who was coming along for the ride with the Eagles. He was very instrumental in helping them win a Super Bowl title.
I think the biggest impact he's going to make for the Bengals is a place where they need a significant improvement, and that's special teams, especially when you look at what the Bengals have at tight ends. And now we're really getting in the weeds, but they don't have that special teams vice at tight end. So to be able to have that at linebacker, and to be able to have that as a linebacker who in a pinch can also step in and has shown he can play a starting role, even though that's not what the league views him as, evidenced by the fact that he keeps signing these deals below $2 million in free agency. But it's very reassuring to have that depth if you need it. The 2021 Bengals are a story of a team that their linebacker depth got decimated, and they stepped up. Marcus Bailey and Joe Bacci stepped up, and it saved the season. So Burks can be one of those guys and then also make a real impact on special teams. Definitely was a priority for the Bengals, too, to get a veteran in a room where they've gone very young.
Charlie, one of the most underreported stories, I think, in the league, and certainly this offseason with the Cincinnati Bengals, is that we all know Trey Hendrickson wants more money. He feels like he's outperformed the contract. He deserves more money. He had to sit and wait another year to lead the league in sacks, and still waiting to get a bump in pay because he feels he's outperformed the contract. Well, the Bengals don't waste any time. If you underperform in the contract, they're looking to get some of that money back. And that's what they did with Geno Stone. After 1 year, right, they felt like maybe he didn't perform up to the contract. Geno Stone rightly sort of downgrades and agree with the restructure of the contract. He's coming back. He was an unrestricted free agent signing 1 year ago. How might he improve upon what he did last year? And does it make sense for him to maybe make sure that he's on the roster by taking that reduction impact?
Geno Stone didn't play at a starting level in 2024. Now, was that because of the scheme? Was that because of how he was used? Was that because of some physical limitations that Stone has athletically, which is why he was a 7th-round pick? He wasn't a guy who popped off the tape at the combine. All those things together are a part of the Geno Stone story. Now, what the Bengals are banking on is, as they kind of go young on defense, maybe him now as kind of the savvy guy as opposed to the guy they need to be the playmaker, which is what they needed him to be last year, helps. They're hoping that they can teach him some things from approaching the run and getting downhill and tackling that can help. They feel like there's enough to work with where they didn't have to burn that bridge and move on. But clearly they don't view him as a guy who was as high on their board as he was a year ago because they just asked him to take a pay cut. So he's kind of stuck in the middle. I do think he's one of the X factors for the whole season because if he plays well, this defense can be good. If he doesn't, it might be a similar story.
All right. I got a list of names. I want you to give me one guy off this list because I think the Bengals have some young, talented players that have yet to fully tap into their potential. And I Bleav that they can end up becoming really good football players. And I'm talking a Cam Taylor-Britt. I'm talking a Dax Hill. I'm talking DJ Turner. I'm talking Jordan Battle. I'm talking Chris Jenkins and McKinley Jackson. And I'm throwing Myles Murphy into that group as well. It's a pretty long list of guys that tell me which one of those young players you expect to have the breakout season in 2025.
The easiest one to say is Cam Taylor-Britt because we've seen it before. All that Cam has to do is be the guy who he was in 2023 before he got hurt, and you're in business. I think last year kind of like, he was carrying a lot of weight, and there was a lot of pressure, and then he allowed some big plays, and you've seen it a million times. It's Taylor's oldest time. A cornerback kind of gets exposed, and then it just beats up on you, and you try to make adjustments, but you're kind of chasing your tail, and you just need a complete restart. I do know this too with Cam. There's a real scenario where, and the Bengals have thought about this, where Cam breaks out this year, and all of a sudden he's a $15 million a year corner. That's a definite possibility for this season that he has the talent and the tools to do.
Any of the other players that you see on the come that I just named, because I think they have loads of talent amongst that group that I just named, and it could be maybe more than one who surprises in 2025.
Well, the one that, I asked kind of veterans on the team around this time of year, who got your eye on? And like all of them are saying Myles Murphy. I think all of them but one have said Myles Murphy. He's another guy where this plan only works with him making that jump. He needs to show up against the run this year. He needs to finish. I think he actually had an underrated 2024 season. He was creating some solid, steady pressure, but it's a production league. And taking that next step can do a lot to mask some of the concerns that you have at safety, that you have some more unproven, volatility going on at cornerback. If you have multiple pass rushers who you can really expect a lot from, that kind of saves you a bit.
I think we're going to find out that this is a more talented roster than what we saw last year. I think we're going to find out that there are some young defensive players on the Cincinnati Bengals roster that Duke Tobin and the Cincinnati Bengals and Zach Taylor, that they were right about. I'm serious. I just Bleav in that because I've watched them practice. I've watched them, and I think they're just that close. Now, in 2025, it has to come to fruition, or we could all be sitting here eating our words. But I do Bleav that some of the young players that I just named, that those guys are going to have a breakout season in 2025, and we're going to have something to really celebrate during the upcoming season. Charlie, good stuff from you per usual, my friend. We thank you for stopping by to join us. We hope that everyone join us next time right here on the Bleav in Bengals podcast right here. Thank you for joining us.